This is one reason why family wineries are so important.
Yeah.
My father is 82, and he's supporting in all the ways the planting of vineyards that he will not see the full potential of. This multi-generational commitment to viticulture, this multi-generational commitment to caring for the land, that's why families are so important.
Hey, this is Harmon Skurnik, and welcome to another episode of Skurnik Unfiltered, where we peel back the layers and get behind the scenes of our favorite wineries and winemakers and find out what makes them tick. And today, I have with me none other than Jamie Schwartz, who is our ambassador of all things American wine. And you recently sat down with Jasmine Hirsch, one of our favorite people in the wine business. And I don't know if you know this, but the Hirsch Vineyards really has a connection to the history of the founding of this company. Because one of the original 6 wineries in 1987 that we started this company with was Williams Cellium. And at the time, Williams Cellium was quite popular for Pinot Noir, but nobody else was. I mean, they were the only ones who could really sell Pinot Noir back then. There was quite a following, and we were really thrilled to have that in our repertoire. But one of the single vineyard bottlings that Williams Cellium produced was Hirsch Vineyard. In the early days, Hirsch Vineyard was just a vineyard. There was no winery. And David Hirsch, who was a New Yorker who moved out to California, purchased this land and planted these vines along the West Sonoma Coast. Wasn't called that back then. But Bert Williams and Ed Cellium went up there and prized that terroir and purchased those grapes for many years before Hirsch started their own winery. And when they did, when we read about the fact that they were starting their own winery, we called immediately and landed this winery, and we've had it ever since the first vintage.
It's an incredible place. I've been lucky enough to go once, but I've traveled out to the far reaches of the West Sonoma Coast a few times. And Jasmine and I spoke a lot about the place. It's magical and really has this like end of the earth feel, being so close to the Pacific and kind of lost in timber coves. It's majestic. And I wish we could get more New York City wine lovers and people everywhere out there, because it is such an intense place.
Yeah, and it's so far from the mainstream of what we think of as Napa and Sonoma.
Yeah.
It's another, hour and a half, 2-hour drive to the ocean from, let's say, the city of Sonoma or Healdsburg. But it is a very special place, especially for Pinot Noir. And they've proven that over the course of now, I think, 20 to 25 years of producing really great wine. And Jasmine has been at the helm now for about 10 years or more?
It's been an interesting evolution for her. You know, she went back to the family winery after actually living here in New York for some time. But, she started working at the winery, traveling, doing sales, and eventually became general manager. And then it's around 2019 that she takes over winemaking. So although she's second generation ownership, she's the first Hirsch family member to make the wines.
Right, exactly. But she's been at the helm being the general manager for quite a number of years before that. And now she's not only responsible for the well-being of the winery and the vineyard, but also the wines themselves. And she's doing an amazing job.
I think they're remarkable, and it's interesting to speak with her about changes she's made. There's been a great cast of characters making the Hirsch wines over the years, whether it's as Hirsch Vineyards or, to your point, Williams Cellium and other producers sourcing fruit from the site. I think Jasmine's really coming into her own as the winemaker, and I can't wait to see what's next.
Well, on that note, why don't we listen in to your discussion with Jasmine and see what we can find out?
Let's go.
We've always taken a tremendous amount of pride in this wine. My father's model for this wine is the great village wines of Europe. You know, wines that can deliver a place and a distinct identity and yet don't break the bank, and they don't need to be cellared. But they really should over-deliver. And we've really done everything we can to protect price on this wine. So like everybody else, inflation's real. We've had to raise prices, but this is the wine that we've raised the price the least. It's a way for more people to access what we're doing at Hirsch. And we're really proud of this wine, and we take it pretty seriously.
Yeah, for context, we're talking about the 2024 Bohan Dylan from Hirsch. Jasmine, correct me if I'm wrong, but my sense is this vintage is unique in, is it the first time it's been entirely estate fruit?
It's unique in that it is 100% from the Hirsch vineyard this year, but most years it's a blend. This is the only wine for which we purchase fruit from some of our neighbors, particularly along Bohan Dillon Road, which is what the wine's named for. But this year it's, 100% estate. So therefore 100% single vineyard Hirsch, biodynamic. I was in Portugal and years ago, and I'd asked if I could have an appointment to visit the Newport estate in the Douro Valley. And I didn't get any answer. And, I was traveling there with a friend of mine from the Czech Republic. She's not a wine person, but she loves to eat and drink. And so this was going to be our one and only winery appointment, because for the rest, we were going to do, culture and things like that. And so about 2 weeks later, I got an email back from Dirk Newport's office that, yes, we would be happy to host you. And so as the day approached, went out to the winery and everything. And then they said, Dirk would like to invite you back to his apartment in Porto. He's having a gathering, he and his girlfriend. And, should be fun, casual, whatever. And, I don't know if people know this, but he's, besides being a winemaker and port maker and owning all these wineries, he's also the importer of most of the best Burgundian domains into Portugal. So anyways, I get to his house. It's all this like really cool, interesting people, not really many wine people. It was a really interesting, diverse crowd. And so he comes up to me and he says, here, try this wine and tell me what it is. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm tasting it. It tastes like Hirsch. But I'm thinking like, I don't want to be that asshole that thinks that it's Hirsch when it's like Roumier.
Yeah, sure.
So finally I just say, I think it's, San Andreas. Turned out it was Bohan Dillon.
Wow.
He had received from his office, this like American winemaker, winery person wants to come see you. And so he was at a retailer here in the city and he asked them like, who is this? And they were like, oh no, it's like a good producer. Like he brought a bottle, because we don't sell wine in Portugal. He bought a bottle of Hirsch in New York, suitcased it back to Portugal just so he could fuck with me.
Amazing.
And it was pretty astounding, pretty impressive.
I mean, the wine world is so full of people who want to be generous and want to share things. And, you touched on culture just a moment ago and sort of like excluded wine from that. And I would say, wine is so integral to that. I think that's what keeps me coming back, I think, is like all of the nuance, all of the culture, history, everything, our world is so fascinating, or the lens of the world through wine and food is so fascinating. So what do you think of that? What do you think of wine culture right now? What do you think of California culture?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. I mean, I think that we have to hold that as a real treasure, especially right now when the wine industry is under so much stress. And I think a lot of us are just focused on selling and surviving and our balance sheets and all that kind of thing. But you're right. Like we do need to remember to hold that treasure of wine and its intersection with, if we're lucky, in a way, every aspect of our lives. And some people may think that's crazy, right? Why would you want wine to be in? But for me, it is in every aspect of my life because it's my family. It's where I live. It's the environment, right? Climate change. Like I think about climate change as a farmer, as a business owner, and of course, as a citizen of the world. And so that's not culture, but it is this interconnectedness that if we are engaged with real wine, it is connected to every aspect of life in a lot of ways, and, family and history and the health of our planet. So,
I mean, I wish that these considerations were more front of mind for humanity. You know what I mean? Like as a student of wine, that led me in a lot of places, but it led me to like studying like our food systems and how broken they are. But I think wine's a really interesting lens again to champion biodynamic farming or regenerative farming, and a great way to introduce these really important ways of life. And sometimes they go back, there's like a history component to it, but like how did Hirsch get to where it is as far as the farming program and everything? Because that's been an evolution and I think ties into this conversation.
When my father first started at Hirsch in 1980, started planting vineyards, we farmed conventionally. We used Roundup. We started converting to biodynamic farming in 2011. And as of 2014, all of the vineyards, and we also have orchards and gardens, everything was under a biodynamic protocol as of 2014. It's funny, when we started converting, we went to quote unquote biodynamic school with our consultant, Dr. Andrew Lorand. And the first session, he asked us, why is biodynamics important to all of you? And, my father gave this like long intellectual answer. And, I said, I don't remember what I said. And my stepmother said, well, we have grandchildren now. And it was like, that was all she said. But I think for my father, from a viticultural perspective, what attracted him to biodynamics was balance, helping the vines find their own natural balance so that the right thing happens at the right time, so that the vegetative impulse in the plant is declining as the reproductive ripening is increasing and all of that. But I have to say, since we converted and have really started to see the effects and the impacts of it, the place is so alive. And our ranch was a redwood forest for millions of years. It was clear cut long before we got there. And then people attempted to live there and live from ranching sheep and cattle. But it's a very difficult place to ranch on account of the fact that it doesn't rain in the summer like most of California. So it was really poor, and ecologically, the land had not been well cared for. And so the biodynamics, my father planted vineyards originally in 1980 as a way to have income from the land to restore it ecologically, to start replanting, to rebuild soil. And he got distracted, for 20 something years by planting vineyards and farming, and then, trying to make all that work as a business. And the biodynamics has been a real return to the original purpose. So there is no such thing as a biodynamic vineyard. It's the biodynamic farm. It's been a way for us to really think holistically about the whole place. And more than 90% of our land is left wild. I mean, it's honestly uncultivatable. It's so steep and so rugged. And there's just 72 acres of vineyard and a few acres of orchards and gardens that are non-commercial out of 1,000. You cannot just think about the vineyards when you think about caring for the land. You have to think about the whole thing. So biodynamics is a helpful framework for that.
My sense is that your father is philosophical or spiritual even. And I love to hear that he's sort of been able to get back to that with the transition into biodynamics. It's not like it just overnight converted to biodynamics. So dive more into that.
He's very philosophical, and he's also a very spiritual person. He is a Buddhist, and he was interested and attracted to that before he became a farmer. But I do think that becoming a Buddhist is a sort of natural reaction to trying to farm in a place where and just to be a farmer generally in the face of climate change. I mean, you control nothing. You control so little, right? And, that's been true always farming on the extreme Sonoma Coast. But, some years ago, he said that he's no longer farming wine grapes. He's farming soil. And I think that is a realization that a lot of very good farmers eventually come to. And I was speaking about this with some vegetable and fruit farmers in the Carolinas. And I said that to them. They were like, exactly, that's like totally, so I think it deepens it, and I have to say, I'm not dogmatic. I don't think everybody should be or needs to be biodynamic to be a good farmer. There's so many great ways to approach ecological care for your farm, your people, your plants, and the broader environment. And biodynamics is one of them. But these different systems of farming, what they do is they deepen our understanding of the interconnectedness of what we're doing. And realizing that, yes, we're farming wine grapes, of course, but what we're really doing is farming soil, and out of that comes these other things. So
it's so important to me. I guess, you probably don't know this, but I started a sustainability master's degree at Columbia, which I think is your father's alma mater, but I did that.
I don't know if he can call it that. He didn't graduate.
Oh, well, I didn't finish this program either.
So you're the same.
Exactly right. Well, the program wasn't giving me what I was hoping for. It's something I started in 2020 when the restaurant world shut down and my livelihood was affected. And it gave me a sense of purpose because wine gets romanticized so much, but it is an agricultural product at the end of the day. It happens to be one that can have a luxury price point, that can be age worthy the way that, the shelf life of a strawberry is much shorter. But it just ties into all of these aspects of humanity, of culture, of life, of climate, all of these things. And I can't get over that. And I just hope more of us can get to this philosophical.
You want things to have greater meaning.
I do.
And you love wine, so you hope that you can find it through that. Yeah, I understand.
I've been diving a lot into consciousness and stuff like that lately, and meditation and Buddhism are obviously very heavily aligned. And so it's a path that many people can wind up on. And it's amazing to know that, your father found himself there coming from bustling New York City and then making his way out to the reaches of, the Pacific coast and so on. And I just hope more people can understand how remarkable this place is, it is the edge of the earth. It is serene and violent simultaneously, I think. I am blown away by people going out there to farm or live off the land, all of it. And I wish people had a better understanding of what that all meant. I do think a bottle of wine is a really great way for people to get a snapshot of that, a taste of that. I think going there is the most important. But can you just set the stage for where we actually are in the world rather than my rambling about it? Where is Hirsch Vineyards?
Yeah. So when you leave San Francisco and go over the Golden Gate Bridge, head north, eventually find Highway 1 out on the coast. You head through Sonoma County, which is vast, following the ocean. And just before you come to Mendocino County, you'll come to Hirsch Vineyards. So it's 1,600 feet above sea level, but less than 3 miles from the coast. It's a region called Fort Ross Seaview within the West Sonoma Coast, and it's the highest altitude point on the coast. It sticks out into the ocean, so it catches all the rain. It's technically a temperate zone rainforest. And yeah, it's the middle of nowhere. It's very rugged. It's very remote. It is not wine country. Like I mentioned before, it was redwood country, timber country, then sheep and cattle, and now there are some vineyards there. And it's on the edge of the San Andreas Fault. The coast of California is young, geologically speaking. There's energy that comes from that. Like you said, violence and also serenity. We get 80 inches of rain on average a year. We just got 5 inches in less than 24 hours, which is not a record. But everybody that works there still came to work. The people that work there are also incredibly resilient and real persevering people, in a sense, like modern pioneering people. Very, very lucky to work with people like that. The place attracts that kind of person, and it attracts people that think that they want to work there, but don't. It's not for them. So, we make our wine there, which is pretty unusual. There's quite a few vineyards around us now, but there's only 2 wineries in our region because it's an incredibly difficult place to make wine. And I think there's something about, of course, how dramatic the climate is, how shallow and difficult the soils, the light intensity, the rain. But then you add on how difficult it is to do anything there, live, work, make wine. I think that all of that contributes to the wines.
My first time going out to the West Sonoma Coast, I hadn't driven a car in maybe a year, and I was white knuckled, I was just clutching the wheel, no cell service, it's a really intense trip. And then you get there, or you get out to Hirsch, and you go down roads that maybe don't have a name and are just not even paved. And you are in a remote place. People live off the grid in this area, right? It's not the rolling hills of Burgundy or the Russian River Valley. It is intense. And I just don't think that can be stated enough. It speaks to the intensity of the wines, the intensity of the character of someone who has the gumption to go out there, I was reading something on the Hirsch website about some of your dad's interactions with the Charles family. And for them to have gone out in the 1850s, it's remarkable that people have been farming this area for so long, and we need to get more people there. I think I'm trying to segue into farm camp and how happy I am that you all have been taking sommeliers from around the country out to the West Sonoma Coast to understand. But what can someone expect for their first visit, whether it's to Hirsch or the appellation as a whole?
I think this is true of probably not every wine region, but a lot of wine regions, that when you finally go, I remember the first time I went to the Rheingau, and you're standing on one side of the river and you look across the river and there's no vineyards whatsoever. And you're like, oh, because that side of the river is in shadow at 9 o'clock at night, when there is, at this northern latitude, there's still sunlight on the other side, and they need that to get ripe. At least historically they did. Who knows with climate change. But I thought the region, a wine region becomes alive when you see it. And we are a mountain wine region. We talk a lot about, valley floor and mountain when we talk about Napa, but people don't think about that necessarily when they talk about Sonoma. And within Sonoma County, there are mountain regions. There's Sonoma Mountain and there's Fort Ross Seaview, and it is a totally different world. So when you come there, you'll really feel that. It can be 60 degrees, but you'll still get a sunburn because the light intensity at that elevation. You'll feel the wind coming off the ocean. You'll see the fog rolling in, rolling out. I mean, it really, you're like, oh, I get it. Like, this is why the wines taste the way they do.
I'm sure that impacts the wines in a range of ways, but tannin, I guess, is something that we don't tend to talk about with Pinot Noir, but we do talk about with Hirsch. Yeah. Is that the only way, or what else?
So I think that the tannin, even before we started making our own wines, which, we've only been making our own wines for a little bit over 20 years, but we've sold grapes and grown grapes for 45 plus now. And so even before we made our own wines, if you were to ask my father, David Hirsch, what does Hirsch Pinot taste like? And, we were selling to all these different winemakers with different picking times and different philosophies of winemaking, different styles. And he would always say, it's the tannin, like there's structure in these wines. And that is 1,000% true. Of course, we have vintages that are more tannic and some that are less. But I would also say that the light intensity combined with the coolness, we're ripening more with light than with heat. And that can really impart a lot of intensity to the wines, yet they still are elegant, fresh, moderate alcohol, high acid. And that's something that I treasure in our wines because I love the intensity of the fruit. Because they're delicious, but they still have shape. They're still focused. They're still pure.
We have the Bohan Dylan here. And my sense is this is, lighter, fresher, maybe more approachable than some of the vineyard designates from the property. We've been talking a lot about just like drinkability of wine or like things outside of the noble varieties. Is there any experimentation going on at Hirsch? Is there anything, whether it's just a lighter style of Pinot or other varieties, like what's going on as your taste and curiosities in the wine world evolve?
I am a reluctant winemaker. I never wanted to be a winemaker. I think one of the things that's really impressive and fun about my friends that are winemakers that wanted to become winemakers is they are drawn to experimentation in the cellar. We're pretty conservative in the winemaking. Where we experiment, where we're trying new things is in the vineyard. That's always where we've been focused. That's always been our bias. I mean, we are farmers first. But I also think that, with the vineyard, a lot of our vines getting older, we have a lot of disease at Hirsch. And of course, with climate change, focusing your experimentation in the vineyard, I think is prudent as well as where our interest lies. Mm-hmm. And so we are trying new things in the vineyard, different ways of canopy management, but also we're planting 3 new rootstocks. We're starting to enter a stage of needed replanting of certain selected parcels. And so we're using that as an opportunity to try new rootstocks. And also we will be planting Syrah, which is a passion for me, but more about embracing the idea that maybe at some point, hopefully not in my lifetime, but at some point, Hirsch might not be a Pinot Noir vineyard. We have to be open to those kinds of possibilities. So viticulture is not an experiment with a short timeline. So we'll plant the rootstock this year and then graft hopefully next year or the year after, depending on how the rootstock grows. But yeah, 10, 20-year experiment.
My lens as a salesperson is current release and repeat every year. And to simultaneously this be a business where like 20-year experimental vineyard plantings are part of the same thought process, or like literally, I mean, generations or things past our lifetimes. I mean, it's one of the things that is so remarkable about wine, but we don't know what the future has in store. So
this is one reason why family wineries are so important. Yeah. My father is 82, and he's supporting in all the ways the planting of vineyards that he will not see the full potential of. And that is this multi-generational commitment to viticulture, this multi-generational commitment to caring for the land. That's why families are so important, because if it's a corporation, they're looking at, what's the term of productivity of the vineyard, and then tear it out, replant it. What's going to be the hot new thing? I'm glad you're focused on our current releases. That's important to us. That helps us keep going. But one of our current releases is a wine called Westridge, which you know well. That vineyard is more than 30 years old. It has a tremendous amount of leaf roll virus. It's a beautiful Muscle selection vineyard, but it also has virus. I do not know at what point that vineyard will stop being able to get ripe. I mean, we struggle to get it to 12.5 if we're lucky. Wow. And at some point it'll get to 11.5 and not, so I'm thinking, all right, should we, it's a 3-acre vineyard. Should we tear out half of it and replant it now? Because we don't know when the vineyard might crash.
11.5 Pinots are going to be so in though that like
there's a limit. There's a limit.
Well,
one year, it's so funny. One year during the 5-year drought, our vineyard that has a lot of phylloxera at Eastridge, It was 11.5, and I poured it for Dan Brown from Costa Brown. We were at an event together, and he said, "Could you get it any lower?" He thought we were kind of doing it on purpose, but no, we couldn't get it any riper. Right. It was so stressed, the poor vines. No, I think, there is a limit at which that's just not ripe anymore, So, but my point being, if I want to keep making Westridge and have an uninterrupted release schedule for that wine, do I need to think about tearing out half the vineyard while it's still producing delicious wine? I mean, it crops like 1 ton to the acre. So it's not like, I wouldn't say it's like financially super successful wine, but we love it. It's so, precious and beautiful to us. But yeah, we have to be thinking about that.
Let's carry on with this. So that's one of the original vineyard designates at Hirsch. We've also just, for the first time, released the Maritime bottling, which is a newer vineyard designate from Hirsch. So, are you seeing the evolution of the property as a whole, and that areas that maybe weren't ready for a vineyard designate maybe are starting to become that way? Is that how the property's evolving?
So, with the exception of a couple very small replants, our youngest vines are more than 20 years old. So we kind of know what's what amongst the mature vineyards. We are replanting some very good terroirs that had phylloxera primarily. So we have an anticipation that they're going to be even better than they were, because now they're going to be healthier, but the spot that they're planted has had a great history of producing interesting and compelling wine. We are developing a completely new 5 acres. And so that will be more of a discovery point for us. The Maritime was a part of the vineyard that was planted in the early 90s by my dad. And then it succumbed almost immediately to phylloxera. It was planted on AXR, which was very popular at the time. So then it was, he replanted it less than 10 years later. So we've just been waiting for it to come into maturity. And it's a larger part of the vineyard, and some parts of it are not interesting at all, and some parts of it are fascinating, and that's taken us a few years to figure out what part of it all has the same microclimate, but there's some variability in the soil. So finding those interesting parcels, and that's why we've only just started to make that. We started making that wine in 2017, but tiny quantities. And I think now not only are we making a little bit more of it, 300, 400 cases, but we are making a better Maritime than we were right at the beginning. So
you mentioned the new 5-acre parcel in relation to the whole property. Are you going closer to the coast? Are you going further away? North, south, east, west? Where is it?
So the only plantable parts are the ridge tops. So it's the ridge that it's kind of the back of the Maritime parallel to the East Ridge. It's going to be very interesting to see what it's like climatically, because there's a gap where I think we're going to get a lot of wind and a lot of fog. So even though it is on the east side of the property and it's east facing, you can't see the ocean from over there, but there is this big gap. So I think it's going to end up being a windy, foggy spot. But the soils are not the same as anywhere else at Hirsch. Being so close to the San Andreas Fault, variability in the soil is dramatic. So it's really completely new for us.
What is the soil type?
So it's variegated. So there's some parts that have a deeper, richer clay loam mix, which is maybe not going to be the most interesting part. But then we also have some that looks similar to the Ration Ridge, so like a decomposed sandstone, but it's more reddish. So it's going to be interesting to see what we produce out of there. Yeah, we'll know in 5-10 years.
Yeah, we can run this back then.
Yes.
Hopefully have a great lunch
like
at Borgo.
Yeah, exactly. 10 years from now, we can talk about the Syrah.
With how fast-paced life is, it's crazy to me that you can be involved in the fast-paced capitalist portions of the wine world and yet be making these decisions that are literally decades in the making. It's one of the fascinating parts of this industry that I can't fully wrap my head around, because I'm not making those sorts of decisions, but I'm eager to see the results. Is there anything else you're maybe not fully committed to, but might be happening? Is there anything that's been totally panned because you're like, this isn't viable and we're not going to do it? What other experiments can we look forward to, or maybe didn't make the cut?
Well, unfortunately, we tried Own Rooted. That did not work. Those are 2 of the acres that we tore out after harvest this year. So that was disappointing. That was, that's like a 7-year experiment that, just have to start over. And what happened was not phylloxera, it turned out to be nematodes attacking those vines. So we've had to learn a lot about nematodes. And when we started farming there were no vineyards there. It was totally virgin land from a vineyard perspective. So there were no nematodes. And now, because we've been farming there for 45 years, now there are nematodes. And they're not a problem for mature vineyards, but they're a problem for baby vines, which we're going to be having more of over the years. So we've had to learn what that means in terms of quarantining and sanitization. And also, it's been the entry point for trying new rootstocks. And in talking to people who know more about this than we do, it's probably the future for a lot of Sonoma County. A lot of Sonoma is first-time vineyards. And as we move into the second generation of vineyards, we're going to see the need for more nematode-resistant rootstocks. So this problem of discovering that that giant hole that was growing in the middle of our own rooted vines. So it was this opportunity.
What is a nematode?
Such a great question. It's something that attacks the roots and eats the roots. So particularly for young vines, it can really prevent the vine from ever developing a root structure. And then it can't take nutrients and water from the soil. And so then it just dies. So anyways, it's been this great opportunity to learn about something new. The other thing that we experimented with was no-till farming. We went 100% no-till. We've had to pull back. We have some vineyards that remain no-till because they just don't need that, and other vineyards where we had to start tilling again. So there's been, I think it's a great lesson in it's not all or nothing. There's a middle path.
I mean, I love the story of how you were grape growers first and then became producers, and like having a winery on site also is like all in the pursuit of understanding your property better and maybe also having more control over things, whereas, you're selling your fruit to someone else to toy with. What have been some of the greatest learnings in that pursuit and process?
I think that there are vineyards that are obviously great vineyards from the farmer's perspective and in the winery as well. But there are vineyards where there's a mismatch there. From the farmer's perspective, it's difficult, it doesn't look that great, but then it can make extraordinary wine. And vice versa is true as well. So becoming winemakers has made us better farmers. It's helped us to understand our site better. And, to use a biodynamic kind of or ecological idea, wines are bioindicators. They can show us that something's wrong. In the case of that vineyard that had nematodes, it was obvious. It was just total dieback in the middle of the vineyard. It just grew bigger and bigger. So it was obvious. But also it was interesting, even the vines that were not visually having an issue, it was taking them forever to get ripe. And so, it was just there. I've had vineyards in my head forever. Like, this is a great vineyard. And I have given it my utmost, both with the farming and with the winemaking, and they still don't produce great wine. And so you just sort of say, okay, well, where does that idea, that bias come from? Like, and well, it's from farming it or whatever, so the wines keep you honest, I think.
Oh. You don't go out to the far reaches of the Sonoma Coast, the West Sonoma Coast, without a certain pursuit of excellence or perhaps even perfection. But is there such a thing as a perfect wine or a perfect vintage, perfect site, whatever that may be?
Oh, I have so many answers. I don't think perfection is very interesting when it comes to wine. One time when I was not working in wine yet, I was working at JP Morgan at 51st and Park. And I was like a little baby analyst. I was slaving away at like 9:00 at night on some dumb PowerPoint presentation that my boss had made me do. And a wine collector friend called me and said, oh, you should come over. They were at some restaurant on the west side. We're drinking 55 Cheval Blanc. And I said, I'm not going to come across town for a white wine. I had no idea what Cheval Blanc was. And he's like, if you think Cheval Blanc is a white wine, you should get your little butt over here. And, when I grew up with a father that drank Burgundy and a lot of Italian wine and Spanish wine. My dad really never drank Bordeaux. I tasted that one and I thought, oh, I understand why people
So you
drink.
went?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I understand why
you
people
got the
drink
white night.
Bordeaux. This is a perfect wine. But I think with Pinot, and I don't know, I shouldn't say anything more about Cabernet because I don't have any experience with it, but I very much want to make wines that are correct, clean, stable, and fit within a kind of classical idea of Pinot Noir, right? But inside that container, which one could say is sort of perfect or whatever. Like that's the hope it should be, inside that container, there has to be room for the wine to be itself, for the terroir to be itself, whether it wants to be shy or angry or wild or kinetic, self-confident, because Pinot Noirs that are perfect are totally boring. I mean, Pinot Noir is fascinating when it expresses place, and sometimes that's not perfect. And that's, I think, where the interest can come from and where the connection, why do you love one crew versus another? Like, and it's different for the other person, so, and if they were all perfect, I feel like that for me means they'd all be the same, which is death. Variety is essential to life, and it's also what keeps us captivated about wine. So if everything was the same, it truly would be death. Some Darwin shit right here.
I mean, I don't even know what to say.
Give me that empty glass.
Yes, thank you.
I hate empty glasses.
Thank you.
I will say one other thing about perfection. There's this wonderful concept in Japanese aesthetics called mono no aware. And I majored in Japanese studies, which is, of course, like nothing to do with wine, but was what I was interested in when I was that age. So mono no aware is this idea that things are more beautiful when you can see that they're passing.
Oh, wow.
A cherry blossom tree that's starting to lose its petals is more beautiful than a cherry blossom tree that's at its perfect peak. And I think this, obviously we don't want to be with this idea of mono no aware, the beauty of things passing. Like we don't want to be drinking wines when they're past their peak, but more this idea of, Eric Asimov wrote an amazing article about René Angel. I think he had been invited to like René Angel dinner like years and years ago. And of course, the domain it was going away. Yeah. And he said, something about the like poignancy of drinking wines that this is it. This is all that's left. And people always say, oh, I don't know when to open that bottle. It's like, this is the moment. Right. Do it now. Right. And this idea that this is the last bottle, there's something so beautiful in that, and that having to let go as well. And I remember once being at Becky Wasserman's house in Burgundy, and she sent her son to go get another bottle from the cellar, and he came out and it had no label. And her and her husband and her son, they sort of speculated for a little while, like what might the wine be? And Alan Meadows was there. And so, playing the like blind tasting, and I was just like sitting there quietly because I was like, I have no idea. And they were like, oh, it's from that section of the cellar that was filled in the 70s or whatever, And then they said, oh, who cares? And they talked about it for 5 minutes. And then they're like, who cares what the wine is? It's delicious. Yeah. I just think that letting go and that openness is so important to the enjoyment of life and wine. And yeah, that's why perfection is, you would say, oh, it's not perfect moment because I didn't get a photo for Instagram and I don't know what the wine was and I can't remember it and I can't put it in my, study guide or whatever. But it's like, no, it's the moment. And you'll remember that more than if you took a photo.
As a sommelier, it's something I would be asked often. People would be like, when should I drink this from my cellar? And it's like, this is such a personal question, It's like, I suppose at this point for me, I'm like, well, I'd rather catch something on the way up and catch it early rather than on the decline. But it sort of depends on where are we overall on that arc? And so many other factors come into play. I mean, some of my most memorable bottles of wine, I don't even know if the people I was enjoying them with had the same experience. It's like one of the most confounding things about all of this perhaps is are we even perceiving this in the same way? And it makes the idea of perfection kind of silly, but I understand why people need that as a North Star or something to strive towards also. I mean, you have a really intense job. We've already touched on the area, but how do you keep coming back? How do you keep there's got to be some bad days in the wine world too, right? And yet Mother Nature doesn't give you a day off, or once the season starts, you're locked in. So, how do you get it together if you're not, you know what I mean? It's honest question.
Well, when I took over the winemaking in 2019, I didn't know how to make wine. And I was so afraid of failing. This was not a little experimental project where I was making a couple barrels of wine. This was my family's winery. Failure was not an option, and I did not handle it well. And I was actually confronted by an employee who told me I needed to change the way I was behaving.
Oh, wow.
I was so insecure, and I was trying to overcompensate because of that. And I'm very lucky and grateful that she said something to me. And I realized that I needed to completely change my orientation around what I didn't know And that gave me an opportunity to change the culture of how we handle when we don't know something at Hirsch, that we acknowledge when we don't know something, and we will spend some time trying to see if we can figure it out ourselves. And then when we can't, we say, let's go figure out who can help us. Yeah. But starting from the point that there's so much that we don't know, and just acknowledging that and being open. I thought that was weakness, but actually there's power in that.
So much power in that.
And it's efficient. You're not wasting your time pretending like you know something, or trying to, let's speculate endlessly about how to solve this problem that none of us know how to solve. Like, let's go figure out who can help us. You meet sometimes people in your industry, and they are at the top of the industry. And my experience has been pretty universally that those are the most humble and the most curious people. There's an amazing person named Alan Benton. He is probably the greatest ham maker in America. And when he was already in his 50s or his 60s, he went to Spain to study how they make ham there. And I saw him shortly after he came back, and he was nearly in tears. He said, if only I had gone sooner, just imagine what I could have done with my craft. And I'm like, this guy is a master. He's humbled by, and he's thinking about the vastness of his craft. And he was almost depressed that he wouldn't have enough time to learn everything. And I think those are the people who are going to be the greatest. Yeah. And let that be a lesson to us all. Thank you for a great lunch today. You have 1 year until I come back to figure out where our next lunch is going to be.
I think we can arrange that.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you, Jasmine.
Thank you.
Skurnik Unfiltered is recorded at Skurnik Wines and Spirits headquarters in the Flatiron District of New York City, which is why you might hear some city noises as we go along, like horns honking. If you found the conversation interesting, please consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a review. You can stay up to date on our show and upcoming events by following Skurnik Wines on Instagram and visiting our website at skurnik.com.